Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first regional transport meeting of the new council. Firstly, I'd like to open the meeting. I'll open the meeting with a acknowledgement to all previous councillors, past and still here. A lot of them have done spent a lot of time contributing to council. Won't mention names, but some have spent a lot of time contributing to council over many years, and others came in here tall and bushy-tailed and thought they were going to change the world and left after a short time. But I think everyone's contributions need to be acknowledged, and I welcome new councillors this year and look forward to your contributions around the table. So may we all have a good, constructive meeting, and welcome. Thank you. First of all, apologies. I've got an apology from Colin Elder. He couldn't make it due to family reasons. So that's it. Declarations of interest. Anyone got any declaration? No? Thank you. The governance work plan. That's basically going to be dealt with today, Tina, with what we've got on here. So no leave of absence. Acknowledgements and tributes? No. No public input and petitions? No extraordinary business? No notice of motions of adjourned business. First of all, I'd like to welcome Linda Stewart. She's online, had difficulty getting here on an aeroplane today, so welcome, Linda. And Tim's on.
Apologies. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So we'll move on to our first report. It's the Chief Executive Staff for information, Regional Transport Committee induction and state of transport. And I'd like to ask Tina if she'd like to come up and talk to this.
So, Jill, so like, if I'm doing this is fine. Button. Thanks, everybody. So, yeah, the paper that is put before you comes along with some presentation slides, just to give you an introduction to the process of writing an RLTP and the current state of transport and what we're to consider the future state of transport. So I'm going to take that the report is read, and this presentation complements that report, I guess. I'm trying to explain all the things. I just sort of thought, well, if you want to ask questions, feel free just to interrupt, or I can have it at the end, up to you. I'll crack on, or yep. So this presentation is to introduce, as I said, the regional land transport planning process, and to show the state of transport that we are planning for using analysis on data that we measure. So the Regional Transport Committee's core function is to prepare the Regional Land Transport Plan and any variation to the plan for the approval of Council, and to provide the Council with any advice and assistance the Council may request in relation to its transport responsibilities. In transport planning, we work with iwi, hapu, mano whenua and partners. As partners with our Māori partnership team, as we do across all our mahi. There are lots of acronyms and jargon, and I'll try my best not to complicate, but transport is surprisingly complicated, expensive, and can get the community really emotive if you try and change any of it, and can reflect the community's inability to cope with stress and other issues at times. It often feels counterintuitive, and the best long-term solutions often look like the opposite of what seems logical in the short term. For example, congestion, making roads wider and faster in an urban setting often makes it harder to move about on foot, leading to more people to drive and creating more demand instead. As population grows and housing intensifies, alternative transport modes can free up space so that those who can only rely on a car can still operate efficiently. Without looking at alternative transport for freight, we have nothing to compare against the rising costs of road, regardless of who pays. Having a transport plan means that these things can be considered in the long term rather than just relying on market forces. So the Regional Land Transport Plan aligns our region with central government transport planning processes. On the right, have I got that right? Green. The RLTP reflects the Council's long-term plan, infrastructure strategy, spatial plan, future development strategy and master planning for strategic input and is required to adhere to the Local Government Act. On the left, on the grey below, national direction shapes the funding pool and we identify what matters locally and try to line it for co-funding. Under the Land Transport Act, core requirements are that RTCs must be satisfied that the RLTP contributes to the Land Transport Act and is consistent with the GPS on land transport. It's considered alternative objectives and taken into account national energy efficiency and conservation strategy and any RMA policies and strategies and likely funding from any other source. These all drive which activities go forward through to continuous and improvement programs, both for state highways and local roads. So the government funds us 68% bar rate, and we stump up with that 32% local share to unlock that investment. The GPS determines activity class funding levels, and this diagram here shows you buckets of what those are. This is an old one, so it still refers to Road to Zero, and you'll find lots of old things we've used. Walking and cycling, local and road improvements, investment management, local road maintenance. So all those buckets are set nationally, so funding is not really interchangeable at a local level. We can't top up one bucket with another. We can't use it for anything else other than transport. And yeah, only activities that qualify get funded. So money not spent goes back into the bucket for other councils to use. That's just a way of thinking about it. And yeah, so we're in constantly fighting against other councils for that. There's never enough money to go around, and it's a bit of a competition out there. So some of the things that are subsidised, listed them out here. We've got investment planning, which is what we're doing now, operations, maintenance and renewals of roads and footpaths, public transport, road safety, walking and cycling, but get to that later. Emergency works gets, on average, it's sitting at 94% at the moment, so there's a lot of different, sometimes it's 100%, sometimes it's less, 88, something like that. Assistance rate for there, so and improvements. So unsubsidised activities are things like our historic walls, because they don't take us where we want to be, I guess. They're historic. And car parks, that's sort of a council-funded activity, rather than an NZTA-funded activity. CBD furniture, so it's sort of like seats and things that are in the road corridor. Except for things like, maybe I was thinking bus stop seats, because I think we can fund that as a bus stop. So yeah, maintaining residential verges, paper roads, private roads, there's a few things there, recreational walking tracks, horse tracks, and our mode shift and active travel action plan that we consulted on and approved in 2024 had an action plan that we didn't find any funding for either. So yeah, we have to come up with our own funding for that. By others, safety promotion, speed cameras is by NZTA, enforcement, drug testing, police. Driver's licensing are others. We have some buses, but not the school buses that the Ministry of Education runs, so that's further out schools. Intercity is separate from us, and rail shipping and airports obviously separate. So while local value can still justify investment, local value can still justify investment, but even if it doesn't qualify for a subsidy, however, we just have to factor in that we pay 100% of that, not 32%. You're awfully quiet, you can ask questions. That's very good.
When you said the recovery was 90%, sometimes 100%, is that just, so when it's 100% it's the same amount as, or is that the NZTA pays that as a share?
Yeah, so that some emergency works is 100%, others, usually it's 20% more than your FAR. I think that's the general rule, but all depends, So somewhere someone has worked out that there is an average of 94% at the moment, but all this data just is in flux, I'll tell you now, so pretty much the numbers change. Linda, Lisa's going, no, that's not right. There was in our report somewhere recently, so I'm just kind of amalgamating all that information in one place. Hot mess. Okay, so carrying on with the introduction, the region's roads, this is an example of older graphic as well, so this is sitting in our 2024 RLTP, which is operative now, but it will get updated for the next iteration of the RLTP, so already some of these bits and pieces are probably out of date. It's the strategic roading resilience business case is it's one of the maps that came out of that, just to show the vulnerability of the local road network. So basically, our region's roads are vast, double the average per capita, 87% rural, long travel times, and we're vulnerable to extreme weather events with few efficient options. Maintaining is expensive. 100% of the freight is moved around on roads, like rail or anything else, which is twice as much freight per capita than average. Only 10% of freight is interregional on State Highway 2, two-thirds of our freight is exported at the port, mostly logs. So state highways, this is probably understanding. State highways account for 15% of our network, but I just sort of thought I'd show the funding allocation of 2024-27. So this is just BAU. This is emergency works over there. This is showing the characteristics of the local roads, state highways. So we've got the length here, that's state highways, where local roads is orange. So the DKT is similar for both, but obviously 5 times denser because of the size of the network on that one. So, the funding allocated is sort of, this half is state highways and this half is local roads, with only about 3% or so invested in safety, walking, cycling, public transport investment. So most of it's spent on maintaining our roads, and like I said, it's about 50-50 almost state highway, local roads. Even though the size is different, the volume of traffic on state highway makes it, they get more money. So the pink up here shows the emergency works that has come through. This is probably quite the most up-to-date graph I've got of it. There's older ones in the presentation, but on the right you've got state highways with that sort of, you can't see it, but it's double the amount of in the same space of time as us. Local roads, but local roads is for a lot. So I guess that's the smaller network getting done quickly, and budgets. It's a larger network. It's harder to get to. It takes longer. So sort of thought these graphs might help explain that, kind of give you some concept of what's going on. So yeah, 4% of the local roads are unsealed. And none of the state highways they're all sealed. So the RLTP sets out the next 10 to 30 years of strategic direction for this region. RLTPs must be developed every 6 years and reviewed every 3. The last review was in 2024, but it was quite an extensive review. With the strategy in place, investment prioritisation develops the 3-year program and a monitoring framework to measure it with. So key milestones include the government's rewrite of the GPS and review of the FAR rate, the funding assistance rate, and around May next year. NZTA set the method of prioritisation to consult on in September, and we upload our draft investment programs around the end of next year, November, December. So this is a bit of a timeline sort of showing where are we now? We're sort of halfway through a cycle, so we've got a year and a half really, a little bit more to do this, to develop the RLTP. So there are some, this is just giving you that timeline of what I've just spoken about in the previous slide with the key milestones and RTC approval at each stage. So once we get our dates set at the next committee, we'll be able to formalise this a bit better. This is just sort of a draft idea to give where we need. So we get about one meeting a quarter, but we'll inject some workshops along the way to sort of set the strategic and prioritisation sort of. So comms and engagement aligns with Council's long-term plan and infrastructure strategy, which is all aligned at the same time. And our final public consultation is usually early 2027 alongside those 2 documents as well. And then the final decision of the National Land Transport Fund is a few months into the 2027 RLTP term. So but we usually sort out interim funding for continuous programs until those things settle. So yeah, we start before we know what our funding lines. Fun. So this slide is just to sort of show the interrelations between the RLTP, the LTP, and the infrastructure strategy. So they're all our long-term plans. They're just slightly different lengths of time and different nuances about them all. So RLTP includes state highways and rail, and sets that sort of 3-year, obviously it's for that NLTP funding, whereas the LTP sets the local share funding, and the IS has that future strategic longer term view. I'm going to talk about some and then we've got the objectives, the RLTP objectives alignment with Council's objectives. So in this 2024 RLTP, our objectives, which are these ones down the right hand side, are the objectives of resilience and security, health and safe people, economic prosperity, environmental sustainability, and inclusive access. You'll see how we do our measures and align monitoring and things with those. And yeah, problems and benefits map that sort of local context and come up with those objectives. So that's what. For further context, just put this slide in as just the last year's financial year for the LTP, and roading made up half of capital spend and quarter of the operational costs and 17% of the rates. So just okay. The investment logic mapping, the ILM, problems and benefits are mapped via the ILM before the projects are scoped. We need clear logic to improve our chances of funding, and it sharpens our internal priorities. It's essential to show why a project is worth investing in. If the benefit doesn't map clearly to the priorities, the funding will be hard to get. And in 2024, these were our 3 investment priorities. So beginning of next year, we look at these again and we compare them to other priorities that have come through business cases and various things in the last year and a half, and check whether they are still relevant or need to be, because these weightings are used to prioritise later on as well. So they kind of help us with these. They're a tool, I guess, aren't they? One of the tools. This is sort of an NZTA, an older NZTA slide, so Linda might have a more up-to-date one. But it kind of clearly shows how it all sort of loops around, starting with the GPS, strategic and spatial plans, all feeding into and developing the RLTP, that list of programs that we then put forward to NZTA, and they this investment prioritisation method across it, along with business cases and benefit cost ratios and optioneering and all that kind of stuff to make that final funding decision. Then obviously as it is implemented, it's measured and its feedback loops around, and that's sort of a 3-yearly cycle, if you like. And this is the last slide of the first half of this. So this sort of is the end of the introduction, but the funding outcomes from 2024 compared to 2021 were quite significant. So I just wanted to sort of show the effects of the GPS. And here you can see the funding buckets really did jump up for maintenance and operations and renewals, or they call it pothole prevention this time. So that's that orange and grey increasing in size, but at a cost of the reduction of walking and cycling and local road improvements, safety and things like that. So yeah, just put that in there for. So any questions before I rock on to? Oh, Linda.
Linda?
Thank you, Chair. Just a note for members, we have organised next week, I think it's after your Audit and Risk Committee, I think it's next Wednesday, for an induction session for all councillors to take you through the, let's just call it the machinations of transport. So how the ministry and the minister set the long-term outcomes called the transport outcomes for the country, how the minister and the ministry set the GPS, and how that then rolls down at a national level in terms of priorities and then to a regional level. We'll also take you through a little bit around the funding, so where the funding comes from and how that is allocated and what NZTA's role is and isn't in that process. And then we'll drop from there into what that means for the National Land Transport Programme and your Regional Land Transport Programme, noting that that also includes your Regional Public Transport Programme, which we haven't referenced because there is public transport contained within that too. So we'll go through that a little bit more detail, and that might help as well. Just answer some of the questions at a detailed level about, your FAR, so your subsidised rate, and how they are set, the difference between that and emergency works funding. But I think critically and more importantly for governance is your role as an RTC and also as a road controlling authority, and what levers you do and unfortunately don't have to pull in decision making, but where you can exert particularly advocacy and political influence through consultation, for example, in the GPS. So we'll take you through that in a little bit more detail. So thank you, Tina, for the overview, but we've got a bit of a session that will hopefully just help delve into some of that a little bit more for you all. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, and we'll encourage all councillors to be at that. It's pretty important. As this is basically an introduction for everybody and just sort of covering how this works, has anyone got any other questions for Tina on this? Teddy?
Yeah, for me, there's some really interesting.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
For me, there's some really interesting stats in here. For example, page 20, it says freight's gone from 2012 to 2017. Freight's gone up 134%. So in roading engineering terms, they only count heavy vehicles. So you're pretty much saying we've got more than twice as much usage, more than twice as much damage on our roads in that 5-year period, and I'd suggest from 2017 to now it's probably gone up even more. I'm just wondering if our budgets account or are aligned to the extra heavy vehicle usage on our vehicles. Yeah, it mentions us some stats here. Page 15, 2%. This one's got 2% of New Zealand's freight, but it's got no time when that stat's from. Is that stat from 2012? If it's from 2017, it's probably more like 5% now, and if it's now, it's even higher. It'd be good to know, like, when these stats are actually from, because it's it's really relevant because they've changed so much. So yeah, it's good to have these stats, but you really need to know when those stats are from, because they're forever changing.
Yeah, those ones in particular are from the 2017 freight strategy. So they went into regional, broke it down into regions. So that's the last rural freight strategy that was done with Gisborne broken out. So that's where it's coming from. But you're right, we need to, and I think it's been said by the government even, that we need to know, need to do it again, like refer to that strategy or the regional strategies or whatever. That's definitely.
Yeah, it says like 90% of our freight's internally.
That's
so
from
the
right.
bulk of that's on our local roads, 4% south, 6% north. I'm just wondering how that compares to other places. I would suggest a lot more of their freight's probably on state highways.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean, we're an outlier, so we're like a freight island. I like to think of us sort of like because we're not somewhere that you pass through to get to Wellington or Auckland. So yeah, we really are kind of like unusual to a lot of other regions. Kind of like the only one that I know. Chatham Islands, I suppose.
So we have a lot more freight internally than anywhere else, you'd suggest? Our roads.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay.
That's a good point, mate, Teddy, and also it'd be interesting to know, due to the recovery for the last 3 years, that's going to have increased a lot of heavy traffic on our road. Repairing these roads, by default, we're actually adding more pressure to the roads. So when we are going out for funding, I think we just definitely need to take that into account.
Yeah, like trucks with the gravel too.
Well, every time, yeah, that's right, every time. It's not just, metal and everything else has to be carted to these places to fix them, so that adds a lot of heavy traffic to our networks. Linda.
Great and really valuable discussion, and I think two parts I would just add into that. The primary kind of form and function of the state highway network is part and parcel to ensure that we respond to that freight demand. And you will have seen through the government priority statement for 2025 the increased investment in state highway maintenance, pothole prevention, as well as state highway improvements. And also the increase in investment to support improvement of the local road assets in a similar way through the pothole prevention and maintenance funding. I would also note as well the extensive work that Gisborne District Council have done on their resilience, the strategic resilience business case, which does help to have a look at some of the points that Councillor Telfer is raising about your most important parts of your network and how we actually make collectively the decisions around where we prioritise that investment to support the growth in the network over time while managing an agreed level of service in other parts of the network. So it's a really, really important discussion for us to continue to have. And as you say, Chair, when we look forward to the 2730 NLTP period, these are exactly the types of things that we need to be thinking about alongside that strategic case for investment. Thank you.
So the rest of the slides, if you want me to continue, probably go into that more. Yes. Yep.
I'll ask at the end.
Okay.
So I was so associated with that is the so it was a decision 3 years ago on a preferred heavy vehicle route, and I see now that the process we're in now is trying to get approval for transport modelling for that. What's that process look like, and how far along are we?
Yeah, well, we haven't started yet because we're just unlocking that funding. It was deemed probable funding in 2024 for the RTP, but we've got a point of entry that we have to update and get approval of. So we're working with NZTA investment advisors on what they need to get that funding unlocked so that we can begin modelling and begin the next step. Yeah, so a little bit tricky with all the other things going on.
Yeah.
Distractions.
There's another response probably to the on page 25 where we talk about interregional connectivity and a freight strategy. I think it's really important that we do have another transport option, but I was just in the point 80 and point 81 on coastal shipping and rail. I just really seriously question the suggested cost of 68 million to reinstate Wairoa to Gisborne rail, where that's come from and how, and whether when that was made. My understanding is that it would cost a lot more to reinstate rail. And then on the next point on coastal shipping, referencing the 3-month trial as being a success. I don't know if it was in the end, and our reference here is 1 month into it, and Andrew Adams saying he thinks it's a success,
right,
sort of
yeah.
promoting the rest of the thing, but my understanding is that it didn't really get the buy-in from local industry that it needed.
And I think that's the sort of things we just need to understand that next step. Why didn't that, that I think just it's not well known why. So yeah.
$2.75 million subsidy.
A bit more investigation into those things. Well, I mean, it was a lifesaver, I guess, at that time, but.
Yeah, and it was that one that was the connection Gisborne to Hawke's Bay,
yeah,
rather than going both ways.
And I guess it's just understanding that, and I think I'll speak to this probably in the slides a bit more, like the funding of things. The level of investment in roads is really high as well, and so when you're looking at dropping $500 million into something like Waka Gorge between here and Napier, it doesn't seem like, you know, I know it might be more than 68 now to reinstate the rail, but I don't think it's $500 million just for a point in time. So it could be that it's actually quite doable to reinstate it, but then there's those ongoing costs of maintaining, and that's what I think needs to be clearer, and that understanding of, is there a level playing field between rail and roads, and that's what we don't really fully understand yet, and I think all the regional councils are sort of struggling with that. So how do you get more trucks to put, you know, how do you balance the whole system and get it working more efficiently? Yeah. Keep going. So yeah, some of this is just to sort of show the same things we've been discussing about, I guess. 2%, we have 2% of the nation's roads, but only 1% of the population to pay for them, and like I say, 2%, we carry 2% of the nation's freight here as well, per capita. So 60% of our roads carry 8% of the traffic, so they're those low rural roads. Is a little bit covered up in that graph, sorry, at the top, the white graph. Forestry tonnage has increased 500% in 12 years. It's another lot. All these figures might be from different reports, so they say different things, and this is a more recent one being workshop with our forestry industry, so I've borrowed some of the headline items there. It's forecast to reach 4.5 million tonnes in the next few years, the tonnage at the port, which is mostly logs. Our forestry routes aren't built for heavy vehicles from the base up. It's just basically they're not built like state highways are. You can see from that investment wheel how much more is spent on state highways compared to local roads, and the roads were only built for 1 or 2 movements a year out of farms, and not the movements that we're seeing from forestry. So there's a change of views. Yeah, it's not coping with it. So yeah, I think we've covered all those other facts. Again, old graphs, sorry, but quite good at sort of, I think we've had 12 significant storms, but there's been another 3 after that, but obviously that was a point in time. So you've had about 15 significant storms now since June 2021. We can see that from all our emergency works applications. Road closures are a measure of how accessible our network is, so how efficiently it's working. And we can see that that's mostly on the rural network. That little graph there with the orange is just showing the vehicles affected annually. So, and then you've got the more granular detail around the spend on the network with TREC compared to emergency works compared to BAU. So again, another graph a bit like the one I showed you before, but more granular, which was from a workshop in March, I think, this year. So all of these sort of show you that picture of how much disruption and large expenditure due to storms have been going on in recent years. So there is a need to better understand freight traffic movements in order to close the gaps for some modes and implement heavy vehicle routes safely. RUCs, permits, tolls, can these help us? We don't know, we're figuring this out. Looking at the externalities, what are transport options interregionally? So we don't talk about the externalities. Rail is 60% less emissions. That says 370 less road deaths, but that's if you didn't have roads at all. So, but this is like Kiwi Rail strategies and things like that. So these things are starting to tease themselves out and sort of present themselves better. rail are being encouraged to think more strategically as well. So is there a level playing field for all modes, and what will be economically viable in the future? And do we advocate for more rail? So these are all questions that other regions are asking also, especially in the lower North Island, which lacks detail that other regions do, like the Golden Triangle and the South Island have their strategies, and then there's the RONs. So a case for freight strategy is something that has been recently announced while all these LTA reforms are going on, and that's starting to look at heavy vehicles a bit more. It's a time to be watching. It's a space to watch anyway. And the strategic rating network resilience case that Linda alluded to has been approved earlier this year. Next slide. Oh, it's back to front now. I missed that. So the strategic rating resilience case reviewed our levels of service and developed a balanced reach framework to better address resilience. It aims to build long-term resilience over a 30-year horizon and focuses on iwi partnership and community engagement. Implementation and prioritisation is aligned with the RLTP that we're doing through asset management and long-term planning. So we'll be looking at the policies and strategic levers to provide a network that can be equitably funded. This is probably going to be talked to more by Lily's team next through the asset management that they do in their report tomorrow. So but yeah, consider the challenges that rating network was highly vulnerable to poor underlying geology, increasing hazard to climate exposure from climate change, and high volumes of heavy traffic. There's limited funding and capacity to manage an extensive low volume road network. Small, economically constrained population. It's a perfect storm, basically. That is constantly changing. That's a map from our website on the progress on all the bridges that were slammed during the cyclones. So I think we've got black is destroyed, red is in design, blue is in construction, and green is complete. We've got a green, which is great, but it sort of shows you how vast the damage was. It's constantly being updated if you want to have a look on our website. So these objectives, I think, have kind of missed those little things at the top there, but we're basically going through the economic prosperity, resilience and security, and now we're up to health and safety people. So there's those 5 objectives that we're aligning all this sort of work and data to. So for health and safe people, we want a transport system that is healthy and safe for all users with no deaths or serious injuries in our 2024 RLTP. DSI, deaths and serious injuries are trending down, but this region still scores highest risk than any other region for a number of factors, the most factors that are listed there. So alcohol and drugs, speed, driving too fast for conditions, open roads, loss of control and head-on, fatigue, older road users, and restraints where seatbelts aren't worn. The rural roads account for 52% of deaths and serious injuries, even though only a quarter of us live there. And the graph up there just sort of shows the DSI numbers split between state highways and local roads as well. So state highways is orange this time, just to mix things up, keep you alert. So even though they're only 15% of our network, they do still have the slightly more risk there, obviously.
Yeah, the sad thing of what peaked in that period when we
locked down. Was there a busload of people or something? I don't know actually. I haven't looked into it, but it's interesting. But there was the Road to Zero sort of kicked in as a at about that time to sort of bring that down, which it has done really well. So there was a lot of work around speed management and road safety infrastructure and things like that, speed bumps and slowing people down, and education, a lot of stuff to bring that down. So we've kind of plateaued at the moment. We've got it in here, but there is a percentage they've attributed to trucks as well, like heavy vehicles, which is about 17%, which is quite interesting because hardly any roads have 70% trucks. Probably our main, I think in the port application, they showed about 17% heavy vehicles on that route to the port. So, it's interesting that, again, perfect storm conditions here. So with 87% rural roads, most of them are open, 100k roads, the long distances, fatigue, twice as much freight per capita where there is high risk. We are a perfect storm of all those sort of factors, unfortunately. Distance from hospitals, other things, externalities to think about as well, distance from hospitals and doctors' appointments and lack of transport options to access these affect rural people disproportionately. There's less physical activity, transport poverty, all lead to worse health outcomes. So the prevalence of these issues in this region contributes to a safety gap and justifies investment for more safety measures tailored to this region, not less, which is what we and then environmental sustainability, which is another one of our objectives. 24% of emissions are from transport, 6% is residential, the rest is all commercial, industrial. To reduce emissions for transport in this region, we are primarily reliant on improving the vehicle fleet, updating to EVs, hybrids, and more fuel-efficient vehicles. We can't afford to decarbonise our buses, but we have reduced the numbers instead. And encouraging other modes, carpooling, flexible work arrangements, design and procurement to invest more responsible industries are other ways that we focus to help meet this objective. Things like drainage improvements, dust suppression, road sweeping, and using safer chemicals for vegetation control are all ways that we help minimise the impact on the environment. Inclusive access, so everyone has access to transport to get where they need to go. This graph just shows the slight increase in our bus public transport networks. So that's the commuter bus, the city bus, the school bus, 9 school buses, and the total mobility. So I've also just sort of shown before and after with our routes. So we did a significant review of the Regional Public Transport Act last round and changed up some of the networks within it using existing budgets. We didn't get any kind of new infrastructure budgets or anything like that, but we managed to do some route rationalisation. So this is showing the route that we used to have around Kotahi, which is a 2-hourly route, and it's now 2 routes, and they take an hour to get around that route. So we jumped on that the other day, and it's pretty good, pretty on time. There's another route that's not shown there that takes you to the airport as well. So you can hourly trips to the airport. It's only a 400-metre walk from the airport, which is less than it is between national and international airports in Auckland. But there's no seat. I want a seat there.
Any indication of patronage change?
I think there's just these slight increases, and like I say, it's only just really happened this year, so we'll be watching the patronage. And then there's also the national ticketing system that's coming in a year or so as well, which would make it so much easier to just flash your card rather than having to go and get a B card and so a B card for $3 you can go spend an hour on a bus. It'll give you the whole route, but it's $5 if you use cash. So you can jump on and just give and we've got new stops at the Kiwa Pools, the beach, which have been added in, and it's extended out to that Kotahi Ave extension, and there's two of the routes go to the hospital, and it's extended out towards Sponge Bay as well, so it's kind of doesn't quite cross the road, but it's on the other side there, just before Whetstone Road. So there have been cap increases and a new electronic booking system called RideWise implemented for total mobility, so that's seen an increase as well. So that's for people that need door-to-door help and pays for their taxi ride. But yeah, there have been, so there's been improvements to that. And yes. But there is still limited public transport outside the city. There's just the intercity buses that head out of the region, but for townships there's often nothing, with only some privately owned operations. Like I say, user-friendly bus stops is a priority. We can deal with that within the budgets that we've got. And a few other councils are doing a mix of public on-demand and running private partnerships, rideshare apps for more door-to-door, but some of them are sounding a bit expensive, and it's a watch this space kind of. So, in the same, this is more a couple of graphs from Stats NZ 2023, so it sort of shows Gisborne compared to New Zealand. School travel in this region is still dominated by cars, with less walking and cycling than the national average. The school bus service performs well, but the public bus is not used by workers at all. And driver's licensing and other restrictions to car ownership are an issue for community connectivity. So the accessible active transport needs to be in good condition and a well-connected network to actually work. So there's still a few gaps in our network. The existing network has, especially when crossing state highway, busy arterials, around busy shops and schools where parking has taken precedence, and at roundabouts. The 2024 Active Transport Strategy identified the network need, but there's not enough funding to close that gap. So priority has been given to maintain the existing network, with only half the maintenance funding that we had in last term. That was reduced as well. So basically, alternative funding needs to be found for new paths like Kotahi Park. And that's it. So yeah, any questions? How do we want us to? Is there anything I've missed that we should be thinking about?
No, I think you've covered it well. This is an introduction, and like Linda said, there's a workshop next week, so I hope you've all had invitations to that. Thank you. So yeah, we'll cover that more next week. So thanks, Tina, for that. Now we'll move on to NZTA regional update from Linda. So I'll hand it over to you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, apologies I can't be there. The challenges of regional flights at the moment with Air New Zealand. I'll just share my screen at this end. Bear with me. Hopefully I can find the right screen. Here we go. And we'll pop it on. Oh, bear with. Can we all see that? Excellent. Thank you. So for new members, how we tend to roll through the NZTA update. We'll give you an update on the strategic initiatives that are informing our work nationally, that are important for our Regional Transport Committee members to be aware of and have the opportunity to ask any questions. and then we'll jump into a little bit more of the detail of what's happening across the network at a Tairafiti and Gisborne regional level, and plenty of time for questions. The pack that I share and gets provided, I only speak to the kind of upfront section. There's further detailed information that's provided in the appendices, which I don't speak to because it would take far too long. But again, happy to take any questions on any of the information that's in the pack. So just noting that what is referenced in the governance work plan is around the introduction, if you like, which is not what this is. That's what we'll be doing with the full council. This is our standard reporting against the priorities of the government and the NLTP for 24-27, just in case there's any confusion. We'll get into it. And we've heard a lot about the NLTP, and I agree with Tina. Wow, do we ever love acronyms in this world? And I promise they will all begin to make sense. The NLTP is the National Land Transport Programme, 3-year programme of investment that sets out how we will be partnering to plan, invest, and develop and maintain the land transport system in its entirety. So just a couple of things that in the previous report touched on, but I want to make explicitly clear here. The government policy statement for transport sets out the priorities that the government wishes to see in terms of outcomes from the National Land Transport Programme, and also makes it quite clear what it wants the National Land Transport Fund to be spent on. Now, as a Crown entity, NZTA is required to give effect to that GPS. We have no wiggle room or room for manoeuvre in there. We are required to give effect to that. Also as well, the National Land Transport Fund, it's really important to note that that can only be spent on transport outcomes. That's legislatively detailed in the LTMA. And when I really labour that point, that means that it can't be spent on recreational activities or for activities or projects that have an interrelationship. So for example, things like flood management. It has to be spent on transport outcomes. We do work together as co-investment partners. So through Gisborne District Council and through your rates, you do provide that local share towards the investment in your local network and also to public transport. And we partner through the development process of the NLTP via your regional land transport plan. There's another great acronym, the RLTP. And as we mentioned previously, well, we're right in the middle of the current NLTP. We're heading already into the development of the next NLTP period. So that's the one for 27 to 30. Just got a high level overview of the timeline and the process that we're working towards. And just want to note a couple of points here for members. First up, our teams will begin to work together on both the State Highway Investment Proposal, or the SHIP as we call it, and Lisa Faulkner that sat with you today, she made it, I didn't, she's doing better than me, is the lead for the whole of the Central North Island on that programme of work. Now, while as the RCA for State Highways, the Road Controlling Authority, sorry, it is our responsibility on how we invest. We do partner with you to make sure that your insights, expertise, the needs, and that we understand the strategic priorities and how they combine with the State Highway network to help support that bid into the National Land Transport Fund for funding. And that process is just kicking off just now. Also as well, we have a team that works with your officers to help support and develop the bids that go into that National Land Transport Fund for your local road initiatives as well as public transport as well. So we work hand in hand as co-investment partners, as well as working together to consider and plan the long-term investment that's required for the Gisborne and Tairafiti region. Just a note on the information that is available to support the development of your bid into the National Land Transport Fund and Programme. We have just recently launched what is termed evidence packs. The pack is essentially intended to be a really useful addition to your transport planning toolbox for your officers. And it's something that the wider sector as well also has at its disposal. This is to help provide kind of early engagement and early line of sight or oversight for your officers as to where we're seeking to reconcile some of the deficiencies we're seeing across our collective network, what kind of proposed interventions would be appropriate depending on the form and function of that network and how it's used, to improve the kind of transparency of the information that is available to support planning and decision making. And also so that we get kind of a little bit more consistency across all of us at the very early stages about what's likely to be coming through and likely to be securing investment as we move into the decision-making process. I would say, though, that the evidence pack is not intended to be prescriptive. So this is not telling you, you know your region the best, and it's not a compulsory or compliance set of information. It's also not supposed to dictate or tell you what we will or won't fund. It's there to complement and support local expertise, local knowledge, and local prioritization of your investment activities. We've actually provided this in response to a request from the transport sector to say, wouldn't it be great if all of the information could be in the one place? And this is what these evidence packs are trying to and beginning to achieve, so that we've got one place in which we can go to get the information that we need to help support that long-term planning and investment. Jumping to one of our current government priorities, and that is the maintenance of the state highway network overall. You'll be aware that I've given a few updates on the shift away from our current method of contracting for maintenance, which is what we call the NOCs, the Network Outcomes Contracts, into an integrated delivery model. The work in shifting to that new contract setup is continuing at pace at the moment. So we've got a number of work streams underway, but notably we are moving towards that contract model in the middle of next year. So I think it's May 2026 we've got on that slide. That's what we're still on track and aiming for, the switchover of 14 contracts, of which the Gisborne Tairafiti region is one of those. There's another 3 that are slightly delayed due to when their contracts were recently just re-tendered and agreed. We will be on track to signal to our preferred contractors just prior to Christmas, and we're expecting to sign those beginning of February. I think what's critical from a governance and at a regional perspective is a couple of the kind of key outcomes that we are seeking is to take back greater control of our asset in terms of how decisions are made on the performance, the quality of the work that is undertaken, and also where and when and how the investment that is attracted to particular parts of that state highway network is used. There's an at-risk component in the contract now as well. So if we do not feel that we're getting the level of service or the quality of service that's required, some of that contract can be at risk for the contractor that secures it. And also as well, there's 20% of that contract, the total contract, will be tendered out in the local market. So we're just using this to ensure that we can continue to support and drive some greater commercial tension within the contracting market, but also as well to ensure that we play our active role as a smart procurer to building up capacity and capability outside of purely the tier 1 and tier 2 contractors, so those smaller businesses that operate in this instance across your region. National ticketing solution, we were briefed earlier on a lot of the great work that has happened across the region on your public transport network. And one of the important national programs in relation to public transport is Motu Move. Many of us will have had the luxury of traveling overseas and had the experience where you can just tap and go on and off any form of public transport, be that buses, trains, or in some instances, ferries. And the Motu Move programme is bringing that to New Zealand. It's been a challenging process because of the number of differences that we see across providers and regions in terms of the systems used and also the rate cards. But we are getting there, and was fortunate to be in Christchurch last week and try it out myself on their network. They're the first cab off the rank for that. You'll note there that smaller regions, so that's all of those in the Central North Island, they'll be phased into the Motu Move programme over the 26 to 27 period. Which will be really, really great and make it much more accessible for everybody without having to worry about only having the correct kind of card. Just for clarity, you will have a Motu Move card should you want that you can load your money onto, or you can just use your credit or debit card as well. We were talking earlier about some of the data and insights that's important for governance to understand and have oversight of when supporting decision making and investment prioritization. And the Road Efficiency Group is one place that provides a good high level of detail, especially for those of us that are not technical, which is the majority of us, but also as well supports your council officers to get into more detailed information, as well as benchmarking how things are performing on their network across comparable networks. The dashboard can be accessed by all councils, all road controlling authorities, and it pulls together metrics not just about how the money is spent, but also how that spending translates into better service quality or safety outcomes, for example. The Road Efficiency Group has recently had a revitalisation. It's detailed in the GPS for 2024. And there's new measures and new data and insights that are available in that dashboard. And I would just like to thank your officers. They're one of the first teams to show that dashboard in our RTC reporting, and would really, really like us to continue on that at a high level, just to give governance that great kind of one-stop view about how the investment and the assets in your region are performing. Very different tact now, but very important given some of our discussion earlier on road safety outcomes. The Community Road Safety Fund, the purpose of that is to enable communities to deliver road safety initiatives that are important to them, noting that communities and regions face different challenges depending on how their network is used, and also as well if you've got a very big metro versus a large rural community. What we've found in our previous work is that community organisations are uniquely placed to help respond to some of the challenges that your communities see. And the purpose of this Road Safety Fund is to help them access the funding to deliver solutions that are relevant to your communities. There are some criteria, of course, around the funding applications, but to give you a bit of an idea, it's particularly aimed at enhancing road safety outcomes for young road users, so 18 and under, so helping them to develop, providing them with direct opportunities to develop good kind of skills, road safety knowledge, and practical application of that, which is really positive through schools, for example. Also assisting young people, so by that we mean age 16 to 24, and people with communities in need to obtain or to retrain for their driver's license, and also as well to tackle some of the largest contributors to road-related harm for that community. So the fund has been open since mid-October. It closes next week, and we'll be moving through an assessment process. We've seen really positive work in the Tairāwhiti region, particularly on driver licensing initiatives accessing this fund previously. A more internal one from NZTA here. Many of you will be aware we've had a new chief executive for just over 12 months now. And he has been very, very clear in providing his vision and purpose for us as an organisation. And that is one that transcends changes in government. It's not about what we're doing, it's about how we're doing it, and also our specific roles in how we do that. So it sets a very, very clear direction for us as an agency, and we are absolutely focused on delivering the right things in the right way with strong performance measuring and monitoring right across all that we do. And I would just say these are our core legislative roles. So we've stripped things right back to make sure that we're focused on what we're actually required to be doing under legislation. It is an internal strategy for us, but I would say it's been really well informed by our partners and stakeholders, particularly through our annual stakeholder survey, for things that you think, and I hope there are some, that we do well, but also things that you struggle with in how we work with you as our co-investment partners. And we're very, very keen to ensure that we address some of those and address them quicker than we have done previously. Getting more local now, I promise. Just a brief update on the state highway speed management. You're aware that under the setting of speed limits rules for 2024, we do have to implement VSLs across all state highway schools by 1 July 2026. There are 8 of those schools across the Gisborne region, and I can confirm that they're all programmed to be implemented by April 2026. Engagement with those schools on the best placement and the right timings for those, while it is governed by the setting of speed limits rule, we do have a bit of leeway to make sure that it does meet the needs of the kind of core pick up and drop off times of each of your schools. Just a bit of an oversight here on drawdown on funding, just for real clarity. So this is from Gisborne District Council perspective on your allocation through the 24-27 NLTP. And it's just to give again us as governors a snapshot of how this is tracking in your region. So for those that haven't seen this slide before, the light blue long line is the total baseline allocation over that 3-year period. The dark blue is what's been drawn down from the NLTF to date. And then the hashed section is how we're indicating, given your previous history on spend rate, if you were going to use up all of that allocation, where we would expect you to be, to make sure that you spend what has been allocated for you. Overall, there's no kind of amber flags in here for us. You will note that there's a bit of a bigger hashed blue line on the external funding. So that means Crown funding for emergency works in response to a cyclone. Some of that, and we're comfortable with the advice from your team, is due to phasing of works, contracting periods, but also as well, you're in the throes of some of the harder and longer term portions of those works, particularly around your structures and bridges. So for confidence for governors, we have our regular operational meeting that covers together to remove if there are any barriers to progress. A wee touch on Waikari. I know it is outside. I've not got my regions wrong, but it is important. It's outside of the Tairāwhiti region, but it is a very important connection south down into Hawke's Bay for your communities, as well as from an economic and productivity perspective. Just a brief update on this one. Back in July, we have signed formal agreements with our iwi partners, which is really important for the progress of the project overall. We've also as well had the registrations of interest back out in July for the design and construct contract. It's now gone to tender back in August, and it will close in December. So we are expecting to award the contract early in the new year. And we are still, of course, pending property agreements on that. So that process is underway, but we haven't secured all of the property as yet. Nearly there, though. And then super operational, but the reason that I bring this one up is because we genuinely appreciate the patience of you and your community when we get into the construction season proper. Of all of the activity that is happening across your state highway network in the region. I would just draw attention to probably most specifically the rebuild side. We've got 13.3 just over lane kilometres of rebuild. And that's the full rebuild. That's not just coming and resealing over the top to give the asset a little bit of extra life. This is the full road rebuild work, and that's where we see the biggest improvements in the performance of the network. It does tend to be the most disruptive as well in terms of delays on the network and the length of time that the teams are there, but that is probably the most important part of the work that the maintenance and operations team undertake, as well as the drainage. Drainage is one of the most important kind of proactive works that we can do, and you can see we've already made quite a good start there. So quite a busy programme, particularly we do it on top of the work that our Alliance Trek are still doing in response to the recovery. So a heads up, there'll be a lot of activity as we continue right through this construction season on both the continued larger projects for cyclone recovery as well as our M&O programme. And you'll be pleased to know that is me, and I'm happy to take any questions. I'll just jump this off so I can see you all a bit better.
Thanks, Linda, for that. We've got any questions on Linda's report? No, we'll look forward to seeing you next week, the Full of Knowledge.
Thank you. I'll try and keep the acronyms to a minimum.
That sort of covers what's on our agenda, but I also want to just have a discussion around the table in the room around potentially bringing some other people onto the regional council, and where I'm talking about that is not just for the sake of bringing people on, but to actually add to the knowledge. And I'll just give you an example. That may be the police, as far as a representative from the police, as far as the safety side of our region's roads, roading network, or maybe a large transport operator who are actually seeing the real, what's really happening out there. So I just want to open that up really to the floor and see what people think about that. Yeah, so.
Are you thinking as per needed or every meeting? Every meeting?
Probably consistently as a table. Linda, do you want to speak to this, please?
Thank you, Chair, and really appreciate you tabling this for discussion. For context, I have 4 regional transport committees across the Central North Island, and I know previously our Gisborne RTC had what we term as advisory members, so they are non-voting regular attendee members. Ourselves as a committee feel can add good value to our programme of work, and also to help inform that long-term view of what is required in terms of investment across the transport system. In other regional transport committees, and all of them, we have the police from a education and from a road safety perspective and what they are seeing and feeling across the network. And then we have a mix of other advisory members. There's usually 2 or 3 advisory members on each transport committee, but they do vary from the likes of a freight representative, an AA representative, could be a road safety representative, depending on the priorities that you feel are important for the region. Any gaps you see in terms of skills or expertise of members are as well helping to inform decision making against the priorities of the government as well. So they'd be some of the things I'd consider. It's kind of normal to have 2 or 3 advisory members, but Councillor Telford, they do tend to be regular required attendees. They just can't vote. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, open it to the floor. Does anyone?
Just wondering what the EA is. That's what I heard. Freight rep, EA, road safety rep.
Linda?
Just your questions to some of the people who tend to be on these additional members on road transport committees. You had freight rep, and then I thought you said EA before.
AA, the Automobile Association.
Yeah, okay.
We have public transport representation, depending, and that's probably more in the Horizons region, given the size of their public transport network. Definitely police, definitely freight. We've also as well had the health sector represented. That's down in Hawke's Bay. So it does depend on the area of expertise that you feel would add the most value and skills gaps. They bring a really useful insight, I think, from the outside in for how our different community groups or different sectors actually experience the network and the decisions that we're making versus maybe our perception of how they experience it.
Nadine.
Thank you. Through the chair, just for the committee's information. So prior to not this training and the training, prior to that, as Linda was saying, we did have advisory group members that were around the table. So we had sector type group representatives that would represent like heavy freight. We did have disability sector that we might have had. I can't quite remember, Linda, there was walking and cycling, then there was also an area perspective. And that was quite common for the Regional Transport Committee for a few trienniums, and it was just the last one where we didn't have any advisory group members around the table. So one of the proposed pathway forward is if the committee were to include that, the terms of reference are coming to council in December, and we would address it through that terms of reference, the advisory. You have an ability anyway as a committee to co-opt on people as and so if you so choose to, but we can tidy it up that way just in terms of the process if you're thinking how this will land by way of resolution.
Anyone else? Teddy?
Can I just ask why it sort of ended? The reasons why they were there and they're not there anymore?
Yeah, through the chair, that's a really good question, and we never really revisited it. I'm thinking it was a matter of timing as well, because then you came into, we adopted the terms of reference. The committee would have made that choice to do so, but then we had the cyclone, and everything kind of got put on the back burner. At that time too, from memory, there were some issues around some attendee issues, so the ability to attend all of the meetings. But I'd have to go back and have another look as to, it wasn't a conscious resolution not to include the advisory group members. It wasn't a discussion that happened at the RTC at that point, unless, Linda, you might recall.
I feel like that was quite a good summary, and I don't think it was ever kind of actively revisited in the busyness that was the past triennium.
Okay. Anyone else got any comments on that?
So just given it time to.
Yeah. Look, I just want to open it to the floor for discussion, but I think we could take this forward. We don't have to do that now, but we take this forward as we go towards our next meeting and see what people think. And also, Colin's not here, so like being a small committee, I'd also like him to have one as well. So,
And heavy freight's a really important one, and previously it was Steve Weatherall, so it'd be interesting what his perspectives are on having been at Rev, and whether he has appetite for it or whether it's more forestry vehicle representative, but it might be most useful to have involved.
okay. Just getting my paperwork right, I need to get a mover in a second for Tina's paper. Please, Teddy, you second it. Thank you. And also, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And also for Linda's report, please. Mover and seconder. Thank you.
Alex is not on the
I'm the
committee.
only one that can do it. Thanks to you. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Right. The last piece I want to discuss is also appointing a deputy, and although Colin's not here, I think we need to progress that towards our next meeting as well, so we will get together and discuss that and come up with a deputy in case I'm not here. Okay, so we will bring that forward, bring it back to the next meeting. So I'll officially, if there's no other business, no, I'll officially close the meeting.